Just don't talk about politics. Don't talk about religion. Just let's move on.
I think we need to add a third thing, and that is don't talk about your knowledge of metabolism and losing weight. Because
God.
Every time it seems like people get together, it's like, well, Bob's on the no-carb diet and he's lost 15 pounds. And people suddenly are the expert. And I've had to train myself not to engage and just kind of say, well,
Good
all
for
right.
Bob.
Good for
Bob. He looks great.
Glad that's working for Bob.
I totally agree, Andrea. Politics, especially, there's such contention in our country right now. No politics, no religion, and
no metabolism.
No metabolism talk, because unless you are a medical doctor who specializes in this area, you are not an expert.
Yeah. Nobody talk about my big tush.
This is Fat Science, a podcast dedicated to the science of why we get fat. No diets, no agendas, just science that makes you feel better. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional medical advice.
I'm Dr. Emily Cooper. I've been treating patients with metabolic issues for over 25 years. I'm on a mission to raise awareness about metabolic dysfunction and why diets don't work.
Hi, I'm Andrea Taylor. I've been fat, very fat, chubby, morbidly obese, and done almost every diet ever invented. They all worked until they didn't. I've known Dr. Cooper forever, but when I became her patient and we learned metabolism was the real problem, wow, everything changed, and I've never been healthier.
And I'm Mark Wright. It's time for Fat Science.
Wait, does this podcast make me look fat?
Welcome to Fat Science. I'm Mark Wright, along with Andrea Taylor and Dr. Emily Cooper. Great to see you two. How are you?
Hello.
Good.
How
Hi.
you doing?
I'm doing great. We are right in the middle of the holidays, and we have a holiday edition. We're calling it Surviving the Holidays because we have some expert advice, well, from Dr. Cooper, about how to survive the holidays. I'd love to start, though, just by sharing a little bit from each of us about what the holidays were like when we were kids. Andrea, what were the holidays like for you? What kind of memories do you have?
We had a lot of food. My mother made every single thing from scratch. There was never anything that was, store-bought or anything that was pre-made. Cookies were one dessert, even though there were 12 or more different kinds. I, of course, always liked putting them on the plates because I would sample. As I was putting them on the display plate, there's a 3-tier display plate that we still use to this day. And I make all the cookies. I bring them from LA to New York. And I've now only made a few different kinds. I will make more and bring them all in tins. And I do to this day love cookies more than pie, more than cake, more than anything else. I love a cookie. It's portable. You can put it in your pocket. You can eat them on the go, eat them sitting down, eat them standing up. And broken cookies don't count. According to Miss Piggy, broken cookies don't count.
That's not a full cookie.
Yeah.
But cookies really are your language of love, because when you came up for the photo shoot for Fat Science last year, you brought tins full of cookies and you gave them to us. What did you make? You made shortbread?
Shortbread.
And
my
chocolate
mom's
chip?
Shortbread. And a good chocolate chip, which I actually do not eat chocolate chip cookies, but I do eat shortbread.
Yeah, the shortbread is perfect with coffee. Dr. Cooper, what about you?
Andrea also makes that butter brickle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Or peanut brickle. Peanut brittle.
Peanut brittle, and then I make a thing that we call crack that I put...
Maybe not so appropriately named anymore.
Yeah, maybe not. But it's like sort of a toffee, and then I put it on graham crackers with chocolate on top so that it's crunchy. It started with matzah, like at Passover, and I was like, why not do it on graham crackers? That would be more oomphy. So
that sounds delicious.
Yeah.
So, Emily, you and Andrea grew up together back in New York. Neighbors, just like a couple of houses away, right?
Yes.
We were just down on the same block, and our moms were best friends, and they were cooking buddies. But Andrea's family really was like the top of the baking line.
My mother was big on baking, big on butter, big on butter.
We have lots of memories of when I was a kid being at Andrea's and with those trays of cookies, and I could still smell them, actually. I mean, it was pretty intense because they were beautiful, too.
Oh, yeah.
Just so many different kinds and so beautiful, tray after tray
Yeah.
of
Mine
a
are not as
variety of
pretty.
cookies, homemade.
Yeah. Mine are not as pretty. Tasty.
Well, you started
Not
when you
as
were a kid making them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, my grandparents on my mom's side, my grandmother's all Swedish and my grandfather was Norwegian. So we had some crazy Scandinavian foods around the holidays. The craziest is lutefisk. I don't know if you've both
Oh,
had.
I know what that is.
So back in the old days, before refrigeration, that's when all the crazy foods were invented because they had to preserve fish. So they dried the fish, salted and dried the fish, and then to reconstitute it, they soaked it in lye, which is basically like a drain cleaner, sodium hydroxide. So they soak it in lye to soften it and to reconstitute it, and then they simmer it, and the end result is literally like hot fish jello.
Ooh.
And yeah, it's got the consistency of jello. And my grandfather would kind of lean over and whisper, just to mix it in with something else on your plate, it'll go down better.
Oh, boy.
Because
Yeah.
it was so,
And it has a
Accidentally falls on
smell.
the
There's
floor
a
for the
smell.
dog.
yeah.
Yeah. Friends of mine growing up would eat it. I'm like, what is that
Oh.
smell?
But others, the cookies though, lefse and rosette cookies, and my gran
Yeah.
used to make some nice
They got some good
cookies around the
cookies over
holidays,
there.
too.
Yeah.
That was good stuff. Well, we're talking about surviving the holidays because I think if we're honest, the holidays can be kind of a stressful time just because families are coming together, everybody's trying to manage things. And then on top of that, there's this idea that food sometimes complicates things. How much should I eat? Should I not overeat? Should I starve myself before Thanksgiving or Christmas? And so this can be a stressful time. Dr. Cooper, from sort of your perspective in dealing with patients over the years, tell us about the holidays and how your patients struggle sometimes to deal with the holidays.
Well, there's lots of different ways they do struggle, but I think one of the ones that's the hardest is they feel a lot of times like they're being judged by people, by their relatives or friends of the family, because these may be people they haven't seen for a long time. And they've always felt like there's that bit of scrutiny or hypervigilance on what they are doing and nosiness. So I think that's been a little bit hard to navigate because our patients are trying to break themselves of any kind of diet mentality or deprivation mode, and they're trying to just be normal. And sometimes they get a lot of comments about the fact
Oh,
that
she
they're
got fat.
right. You probably have heard
Yeah.
it, Andrea.
Oh, yeah. Well, you don't necessarily hear it, you feel it. You feel like, oh, she's gained a lot of weight this year. And then, so if you feel that, and then you take a lot of stuffing, or you're eating a lot of cookies, you feel the, you feel the eyes on you of like, oh, she really should just eaten the beans. Or just, why didn't she take more asparagus than stuffing or than the sweet potatoes? You feel it. You definitely feel that. And it's like, well, I like the stuffing better.
But isn't that funny, though, that people feel somehow a license to comment and to judge other people? And it's
The
like,
judging is big. The judging is real. The
Yeah.
judging is real. And on the flip side, it's like, why are you better if you're thinner? Like, what does that mean? It's like, I think you're better if your outfit's nicer. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like,
take care of yourself. And
and you just are happier or whatever. But that somehow doesn't matter. That is not where it's at.
it's just a misunderstanding and just a false equivalence. It's not,
Right.
It's something that's so ingrained into our society, but we don't want to buy into it. But then there's people around us that do. That's their platform.
Yeah. And in the same breath of, oh, she's really fat this year. It's also like, well, didn't you try my sweet potatoes? They're like, this is the greatest recipe ever. Like, you have the same thing going on of like, there's a competition for who made the better thing, and then everyone's talking about it. Yet they don't want you to try it. It's like the most catch-22 thing going on. It's really crazy.
It's just the same with the assumptions of if a person happens to have a high body weight, they must be eating this, and
Weight.
this wrong.
Right.
And then if a person has a normal weight, what are they doing? Are they counting all their food? No. Are they? No, they don't even think about it. They're eating all the same things that the other
Right.
person's eating or more usually because they're not as inhibited.
Right.
So it's just very strange that people aren't seeing how obvious that is.
Or the other people who go and stack their plates so high with so much food, and then they're so ill at the end of the night. Instead of just like, let's just eat a little bit of a lot of things and not have to lie down with our pants undone. And I mean, it's crazy how much food some people eat and how much they take. Or they're like, I didn't eat for 2 days before I came
That's
because
it.
I knew the food was going to be so good. I mean, that part is crazy too.
I have to admit, though, there have been times, this is before I was your patient, Dr. Cooper, but there have been times in the past when I did have to undo my belt a notch or two just to alleviate the pain. But, you know, one thing that I think is interesting now that we're on GLP-1 drugs, Andrea and I are, it's impossible to overeat on those drugs, I've found.
Right.
And portion control and just the whole idea that, oh, I got to watch out that I'm overeating. I feel so full so soon compared to the old days. The old days I could just eat and eat and eat and eat and really wouldn't feel full until I really overate. But the really amazing thing about these drugs is your body is so tuned in to the satiation that you feel after having just a little bit of food. And I find that completely refreshing because I'm not having to worry about it. When I eat and then when I feel full, I stop.
Right. It's like barriers have been put up with lights on the top of them going beep, 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 beep. And then it's like, nope, 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 nope. You're done. You're done. You're done.
Yeah.
And that's what people without metabolic problems feel all the time when they
Oh.
eat. It's really pretty similar. I guess it could get more intense because sometimes the drug effect is strong, but that's what we have to watch out for. We have to make sure that people are eating regularly in spite of the fact that they may be less craving foods or more satiated. We don't want people to have to like stuff themselves or feel uncomfortable, but it's just to keep an eye on the fact that we do have to have our patients at least eat every few hours and make sure that they are getting something in. And it's funny because even without these drugs, when people try to use things like that, quote, portion control, that just doesn't work. And so I've never been a fan of that at all. But the biology is just our natural mechanism of just knowing when we're hungry, knowing when we're satisfied, and people with metabolic dysfunction often are lacking a lot of those cues. Not always. I mean, sometimes the cues are in some people with metabolic dysfunction have them never hungry or too full. It's not the same for everyone. But the GLP-1s do balance that aspect usually. And so I think the main thing is around the holidays, what I see too often is people just getting off track with their regular routines. And once you're off track with that regular routine, you're kind of setting yourself up for some type of metabolic dysfunction. Because if that means that you're getting less sleep, that affects the metabolic hormones. If it means you're more stressed, affects the metabolic hormones. If you're skipping meals or saving up your calories or pre-exercising, before the holidays, that's going to mess up the metabolism. So I think staying on a regular schedule is so valuable throughout the holidays as best as you can.
I think what we also have to remember when you're on the GLP-1s, and especially me because I have a smaller stomach due to the gastric sleeve, and I get fuller faster, I have to remember to go around the plate and not just eat the stuffing and eat the other things that have the protein so that I balance it. It's just something to keep in your head if you're on those drugs because you will get fuller faster. So you have to remember to just keep it balanced.
Right.
And the pitfalls of quote unquote portion control, Dr. Cooper, it's really predetermining what you should have and not letting your body tell you what you should have, right?
Right. That's exactly right. It's not, we always talk about this physiologic intuition being so important, just letting your body give you those cues and responding to the cues. But when you're using your mind so much to tell you how much you should eat, and a lot of people gauge what they should eat by looking at what other people are eating, and that really makes no sense either, because no two people have the same needs. And so, but that would tell you if someone has to do that to figure it out, they must have a metabolic problem because they're not feeling secure or confident in how they're choosing to eat. And so that would tend to illustrate that there's got to be some faulty signaling going on in that metabolic brain pathway.
We should talk about tryptophan because it has sort of a mythology connected to it. Tryptophan is an essential amino acid found in a lot of protein-rich foods. So it's not like some weird chemical. It's just
An amino acid.
it's an amino acid. And I did a little bit of research on it and found that a lot of foods like chicken and pork have about the same amount of tryptophan as turkey does. So we think that
Really?
yeah, we think that, if you eat turkey, you're going to immediately fall
Right.
asleep like you have some sort of sleeping disorder. But Dr. Cooper, from a chemistry standpoint, that's really kind of a myth, isn't it? That tryptophan has this massive impact on our bodies.
I don't know. I think it is. I think the main thing is that people, as Andrea said, just consume so much food at once. And,
Yeah,
And
maybe
even
the
if you
3
have-
pounds of stuffing you ate
Yeah.
could be
Yeah.
making you
Or
sleepy.
maybe they just don't want to talk to the rest of the family and they just want to sleep in the big chair in the other room.
But, even if you have a really strong metabolic system, I mean, your digestive process requires a lot of energy. So it probably puts us to sleep just to try to process all of the stuff that we just put into our body.
Yeah.
Ooh, that could be it.
Yeah.
That's funny. I had no idea. I always thought that it was just more in the turkey.
It's just
Wow, it's bad PR
Protein.
for the turkey.
bad PR for the turkey. But Dr. Cooper, what's your best advice when it comes to just having a sensible outlook on the holidays from a food standpoint? You mentioned stick to the routine of scheduled eating. Try not to get too far out of your zone of what you've been doing, right? Any other advice?
I know that the holidays just bring on a lot of stress too. And I think that's an area that easily derails us from our normal routine anyway, because there are a lot of unexpected events, last minute preparation for the end of year deadlines, and then planning for the new year. There's just so much going on. And then kids are home from school for vacations. And
Way too long.
yeah. So it can get to be a hectic time, and family can come visit or people go visit their family. And so there's a lot of things that are outside of our normal routine. So I think the more we can do to anchor ourselves with sticking to what we can of the semblance of our usual routines, the better. And so waking and going to bed at the same times, if we can, trying to keep hold of that bedtime, because once that gets out of line, then a lot of things can fall away after that. That, and then having breakfast within an hour of waking up, whether or not you're going to go to a Thanksgiving meal or a dinner later in the day, a holiday dinner, just getting on track to stay on that regular schedule. And I think as far as workouts go, if you have a lot of stress, the worst thing you can do is go do heavier and heavier workouts, because it may make you feel better, but it's actually not good physiologically, because we talked about before the fact that the workouts increase our cortisol levels and stress increases our cortisol levels. And so then you've got competition there piling on of all the stresses, and then you add to it the exercise and you may not be fueling well. So it's not that you shouldn't exercise, but again, it's another area to just keep maintaining a steady level of what you're usually doing and take appropriate recovery breaks.
You know, you see all the Christmas movies, you see all the Thanksgiving movies, and you just want everything to be perfect. And you know what? Life isn't perfect. And it kind of makes everything really stressful. Like, you want the table to look beautiful, you want everything to be great, you want your family to just say they love you and everything is perfect. And you know what? It doesn't work out that way. And the food, something's going to burn, the fire alarm's going to go off, and somebody's going to drop the flan, which happened to us one year. And we picked it up off the floor, by the way. And my mother forgot to put sugar in the pumpkin pie one year. That was a
Oh,
disaster.
no.
And but you know what? Life goes on. And we all move along, and somebody's not going to talk to somebody, and somebody's going to storm out the door. And you know what? It's all going to work out eventually. Just don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion. Just let's move on.
I think we need to add a third thing, and that is don't talk about your knowledge of metabolism
Oh,
and
yeah.
losing weight.
Oh,
because
God.
every time it seems like people get together, it's like, well, Bob's on the no carb diet and he's lost 15 pounds. And people suddenly are the expert. And I've had to train myself not to engage and just kind of say, well,
Good
all
for
right.
Bob.
Good for
Good
Bob.
for Bob. He looks
Yeah.
great.
Glad that's
Bob.
working for Bob.
I totally agree, Andrea. Politics, especially, there's
Yeah.
such contention in our country right now. No politics, no religion,
Yep.
and for
And
God's
no
sake,
metabolism.
no metabolism talk. Because unless you are a medical doctor
Yeah.
who specializes in this area, you are not an expert.
Yeah. Nobody talk about my big tush.
Well, you worry too about what children that are present are hearing also. That has to do with all this body talk and food talk. So if you have kids, I think it's not out of line to
That's a
set
big
some
I-
expectations
yes.
of maybe your parents and what they're going to say and the family members, and just at least request that some of that talk is avoided.
Yeah. Let's just enjoy the sweet potatoes today, please.
Yeah, no judgment on the, you shouldn't have dessert or you shouldn't do this. Because we just talked about that study that recently came out this fall that mentioned, 75% of Americans are now either overweight or are obese. So what the takeaway from that is, what we're doing is not working, period, hard stop. It's getting worse. It's getting exponentially worse. So for people to think that, it's just calories in, calories out, what we're doing is not working. The multi-billion-dollar a year diet soda industry, if diet soda worked, we would not have an obesity epidemic. I mean, it just does not compute.
No, it's the financial aspect of it that keeps it going, really. I mean, and preying on people's vulnerabilities. But I think it goes further. We shouldn't even probably be telling people how pretty they look and how, I don't know. I feel like it's a little bit so much more emphasis on that physical shape or size or aspects of our physicality that are overly emphasized and judged. And so that could go both ways. It's not just the critique, it's also the compliments when someone has lost a lot of weight. Oh, you look so XYZ. It's just what? Because the weight went down?
Right.
It's
And they
just-
always want a number. Let me tell you, they always want a number. How much have you lost? How much?
And what would you say, Andrea? What you should say?
I say a lot.
I think that it's hard to navigate. Like, what do you say when people kind of overstep those boundaries? And especially if they're family members, how do you have those conversations? Especially if you have children that you're worried about the language continuing to another generation. And these are hard discussions. I almost feel like therapists are the best at recommending how to navigate these conversations. And I have had some patients that have worked with their therapist pre-holiday on how to assertively state something without offending people, but protecting their boundaries and protecting their children's exposures as well. And I think it's not crazy to spend a little time looking into that and having a script that you know that you're going to pull out no matter who starts commenting. Sometimes you can just ignore it, but if it's a family member where it's repeated and it's somebody that holds some level of respect within the family and that children are interacting with, I think it is a conversation that needs to happen.
I think it would be helpful, Dr. Cooper, if we talked about people who are maybe just starting GLP-1s, because it's crazy. I know so many people who are now on these meds, and I don't know if they have metabolic syndrome or what, but these drugs are being prescribed at an amazing alarming rate. They're seeing results, but there's an adjustment period, isn't there, really, when it comes to, I think one of the most common complaints that people have is they feel nauseated after they eat. And so explain the philosophy of the way that you prescribe them anyway is a lot of times you'll ramp up the dosage to get your body used to what's going on. How does that work? What is the body doing in that sort of introductory phase?
Well, it's essentially acclimating to the medication, and starting out really at the lowest possible dose is always a good idea. And sometimes even lower than the normal starting doses is appropriate. So again, it depends on the patient, the person, and how their tolerance to medication in general has been, what their baseline situation is, if you're concerned at all that they have underlying gastrointestinal conditions. So I think starting very, very low and incrementally increasing, we as providers give patients guidelines, but we always tell them you can go slower than that if you're not tolerating. And then sometimes we have experienced patients. We'll tell them the starting point and the end point and general concepts of how to increase it, but have them try to do it based on the feedback that they're getting physiologically, because sometimes that's the best. But if you think about it, these meds, the injectable meds, the side effect window is usually accentuated in that 24 to 72 hour post-injection period, because that's when the levels in the system rise the most. So within that 72 hours after the injection is usually the most side effects. But as you inject these medications week after week after week, if you're doing an injectable, I mean, there's one oral medication too. But as you're doing this week after week, the blood levels and the system levels increase gradually to a point where they remain steady. And that process takes about 6 weeks. So after about 6 weeks, if you've been on the same dose, you're pretty much acclimated to that dose, or you should be. And you shouldn't experience as much in the way of those post-injection side effects. But if you do, then we always, with our patients, try to reduce the dose because it interferes with normal eating if you're having GI upset, and it can progress to other nutrition deficits and things like that. And that's not the goal. So going slowly, being willing to back off the dose if you're having side effects, being patient, I think that's the key. But it's true, making sure that the person that's taking these medications is an appropriate candidate for them in the first place. And so that's where meeting with a person's primary care doctor or a specialist to really discuss what these medicines are for and what their case is and why they would be a good candidate or why they might not be is important.
It seems like, though, with the GLP-1 drugs, your appetite just really isn't what it used to be, and it's super tempting to skip meals. Dr. Cooper, what happens if you start skipping meals? Let's say you skip breakfast and you don't eat until 2 p.m., and then you don't really feel like dinner because you just ate at 2 p.m. What happens if you skip meals on GLP-1s? Does it eventually catch up to you like it would if you weren't on those meds?
Yes, it really does. In the background, what starts happening is you're starting to create this diet effect, which is that defensive body weight that dieting does. And so hormones like leptin will start to decrease, and hormones like ghrelin, that hunger hormone, will start to increase. Neurotransmitters in the brain that say you're in a famine will increase. So your metabolism will start to pull back and slow down. And so in spite of taking the GLP-1, the weight trends that you were experiencing before will just come to a halt, just stop moving. And you'll feel tired. Your blood sugar could start getting unstable. You'll be foggy, concentration not as good. All kinds of things can start happening. But people are so used to doing that and so used to not prioritizing their food intake that it's very easy to do, especially if the prescription is given to someone like, here's this medicine, it'll help you stay on a diet or help you not eat. That's really not the way these meds should be used at all. So we want to make sure that people taking these medications are following a normal eating pattern, a nutritious diet, all the food groups, eating consistently. It may be that at any given time you can't eat as much food as you used to eat, but you should still be eating at those intervals and getting something in so that it's steady throughout the day, so that there isn't a point during the day where you're firing up all those famine signals again, like you used to with the diets, because then you have something introduced that's literally fighting the power and the capacity of the GLP-1 medication. So you're making that GLP-1 a lot weaker if you have that happening.
Unfortunately, I can tell you that there are a lot of people out there who are using the GLP-1 in exactly that way to not eat.
Right. And that's why those drugs, for a long time, they called this group of medicines diet drugs.
Right.
Just because they might affect your weight, they started calling them diet drugs. But originally, they were mostly just these amphetamines that suppress your appetite. So they were called diet drugs. But people are using these GLP-1s to just suppress appetite, eat as little as possible. I was at a conference once, and some doctors were saying, well, when the patient's nauseated and vomiting, it's because their body's just trying to tell them, you shouldn't be eating. You shouldn't be eating so much. And I'm just thinking, are you kidding me? No, it's trying to tell them that you should be on a lower dose. I mean, they thought it was terrific that these people were vomiting.
Oh.
And just that they're, the message should just be, well, that's the medicine helping tell the person that they ate too much. That is just not the case. So it's sad. I think the perspective out there about the righteousness of eating as little as possible or as little carbs as you can or going
still out there.
more hours without eating. But this is the thing that, getting back to the holidays, we're going to encounter people that are very nervous about going off of their obsessive plans during the holidays. And so I think that our group of listeners to this podcast and my own patients probably are some of the most comfortable people actually during the holiday, because they're not on a plan like that. And they're very comfortable, or at least they're becoming more and more
Right.
comfortable if they're not already, with just eating.
I've never been more comfortable around food than I have been in the past, 10 years. I mean, it used to be food was sort of the enemy, and food is not the enemy anymore. Food is just food's my friend.
Especially around the holidays.
Yeah. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, good, lots of nice things, lots of good things being around. And it's like, if I want them, I have them. If I don't, maybe there's a box to bring it home.
That's awesome. So as we wrap up our episode, you two, surviving the holidays, final takeaway, Dr. Cooper, what's yours?
Just relax, stay on a schedule, try to get enough sleep, and try not to preemptively reduce your food or increase your exercise, because that'll just end up in serious trouble. And enjoy time with family, enjoy the holidays.
Andrea, how about you?
I take little bits of every single thing and put it on my plate. I try every single thing that everyone made, and I put it on my plate, and I have little bits of everything. So my plate looks full, so nobody looks at my plate and goes, what, you didn't like what I made? You didn't like, what? You didn't like it? I'm like, no, I took it. I love it. I love it. It's great. You really made a lovely whatever that thing was. I don't know what it was, but it's really good. That brown whatever.
Whatever,
But
whatever it was.
But no, I like to try every single thing. It's really fun. And I just, it's just sad that everybody is so uptight about everything and doesn't want to eat. And then they're nervous that everyone's going to look at them, and just have a good time. Say hi to people. Wear a stupid sweater. Just be in a good mood.
Yeah, I think I agree with what Andrea said. It's not going to be perfect, and sometimes we mess things up by thinking it is going to be perfect. I think, Dr. Cooper, what we've learned from you over the years most is that if we obsess about food, it's really not a healthy thing to do. And I just think the holidays are a perfect time to just see food as love and appreciate family. We don't know how long we all have, and we don't know who may not be with us next year. So,
Good point.
worrying about all that other stuff seems to really be just defeating the purpose of what a holiday is, and that's a time to celebrate.
Right. The
with each
brain is
other.
the CEO.
Yep. Well, this has been a fun conversation. Happy holidays to you too. This has been another edition of Fat Science.
No diets, no agendas, just science that makes you feel better.
I'm Mark Wright. Thanks for listening to Fat Science with Dr. Emily Cooper. New episodes drop every Monday. If you've enjoyed the conversation, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. This production is for informational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional medical advice. Join us next week for another episode dedicated to the science of why we get fat. No diets, no agendas, just science that makes you feel better.